Okay, so we're back with week 4
Week 4.
of watching Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings.
This one I feel like was as bad as the last one.
No, because we had more to do. So we said last time that I was going to try and pull up the screenplay so I could read along with the movie and figure out what the act structure of this was. So I found a transcript because Marvel is still very touchy about having their things out there even after the movie is released. So you can only find a handful of Marvel screenplays. And if the movie didn't do well, no chance of finding it. So I didn't feel like putting the transcript into Final Draft and reformatting it myself. So the transcript was very little help because screenplays are formatted in a very specific way. But as we watched, I did my best to try and figure out what their act structure was. Now, just so we know I say I'm an aspiring screenwriter, but you say aspiring and people discredit you immediately. I have taken screenwriting classes, and in those screenwriting classes, I have been giving plot formula checklist worksheets. There are 11 options from of the most common plot structures that writers use in both narrative literature and in movies and television.
And that's something we should be noticing more and more as we watch this movie, is that the structure and thus the pacing of it is weird and more nonsensical the more you think about it.
Because I think the act structure that most people attribute to movies in general is the 3-act structure, which is common. It's there for a reason.
Like, it works. That's the reason that
that's how people teach act structure off the beginning is 3-act structure. So layman's know what 3-act structure is. That is what I used as my analysis. But there are other options. I read my other options, and Nigel Watt's 8-stage plot structure is the closest to what fits this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Step 1, the stasis, background information. That would be what the prologue is. In Act 2, his second point is the trigger. I would argue that is the bus scene where Sean's amulet gets taken.
Yes, and still, as we will reiterate, the best scene in the movie, the most fun, the most exciting.
Easily the best scene in the
movie.
movie.
The best comedy as well.
Yeah, it was really
shout out to our boy Cleve.
Clev.
Clev?
Clev.
Yes, Clev. Clev with just the great witty comment.
So
still so good.
Plot point 3 would be the quest. Now, here's the problem, is that there really isn't one. The closest that my mind connects is Sean going to find his sister and warn her that the 10 rings are coming for her amulet.
There was not much of a quest. He just sort of says he does it and then does it.
The surprise would be the 10 rings attacking and them reuniting with their dad, because I don't think they actually expected Dad to be there.
Yeah, I think his dad is the surprise.
5 would be the critical choice. This just has a question mark next to it because there isn't one. There is no... Sean makes 0 choices in this entire movie because, again, it's plot-driven, not character-driven.
There was almost a choice.
There was almost a choice.
There was almost a choice.
But there wasn't, though.
In the climax of the movie, when his sister is about to be taken by the dark whatever, he's holding on to her, but the dragon's soul's about to be sucked down, and she's like, "You have to let me go. It's okay. You'll be fine." And
but
he's
then,
like, "No, I won't
but
do
then
it."
Katie comes out of nowhere with that arrow, and therefore takes that choice away from him.
And then he gets to have his cake and eat it too. And so why were we given his moral dilemma that he doesn't have to make in the end?
Point number 6 is the climax, which is the big fight. Now, the climax, he specifically states that there has to be consequences. Now, the only consequence that really comes out of this big fight is their dad died, but this consequence is not acknowledged at all.
No one mentions
for the whole rest of the movie.
They don't mention the fact that he's dead. They don't mourn him. They don't grieve him. Everyone who's dead gets we will remember you all at once,
right,
all together. No one specifically.
Point 7.
Not the antagonist.
Point 7 is the reversal. Which just means that the results of this climax is there is a change in status. But again, there isn't one.
In fact,
Sean and Katie go back to the real world.
The movie highlights the fact that there isn't a change in status.
They go back to their
They're back
Valet
to they're back
jobs.
to the same dinner they had in the beginning of the movie.
There is literally no change. And 8 is the resolution, and again, there isn't one. So let's go back to this fancy 3-act structure.
Again, there's explicitly no resolution because Wong comes in and says,
I made a
more
chart.
next time.
I made a chart. This is the chart of what the writers think their 3-act structure is. And this is a chart of structurally, when looking at a 3-act structure, where the movie would fit within it. Again, I reiterate, you may only break structural rules if you understand them. These filmmakers, Zack Snyder, you don't understand the rules, you don't get to break the rules. Okay, here we go. I think the writers think that their inciting incident was the bus scene, the amulet getting taken, which means end of Act 1 would be Sean and Katie leaving for Macau. In reality, structurally, the inciting incident is the second pendant being taken and Sean and his sister reuniting in Macau. That's at 43 minutes.
Yeah, because before that point, we don't actually have all the main players in the story assembled.
Which means it can't be the end of Act 1. The writers, however, their Act 1 was at about 24 minutes, which page number-wise is correct, but narratively, what they did with those 24 minutes was all wrong.
And mostly in the sense that it was pointless. Right? We are introduced to characters. They aren't fleshed out. We don't really get a good sense of their relationship beyond the most surface level. We don't understand their relationship to the world, their history, their opinions on things,
right?
What defines them as people, their flaws are deeply, the things that we'll learn to care, why we'll learn to care about them as the movie goes on, or reasons why if things get tense, we are going to be hoping that our characters get through it. We get that they are working jobs that other people are unhappy with, but they're okay with. That they're not the most responsible, I guess, but not in a way that's actually damaging to anyone.
To them or anyone else.
Yeah, or to anyone else. That's it, actually. There really isn't much else to their characters. Apart that, Katie can drive cars real good, because that's important later, or else we can't have her drive through the forest, even though it's just driving. She's not out racing anybody later, so it really doesn't matter. Yeah, that's it. That's all.
Moving to Act 2, the writers think that Act 2 is, again, starting after them leaving for Macau. So Act 2 would be them arriving in Macau, which means Obstacle 1 would be the 10 Rings attacking again.
Yes.
Obstacle 2 would be Dad throwing them in the dungeon. Then we're getting to Ta Lo,
which is the most contrived thing I've seen by a lot.
And I think their midpoint is arriving at Ta Lo.
Can we talk
with Sean and Katie and sister arriving at Ta Lo would be their midpoint.
Can we talk for a second about the whole getting to Ta Lo thing?
Go for it.
Because so we have the whole so they meet up with their dad. Dad explains the situation. He explains that he knows how to get there, that he's gonna do it, that he's gonna burn the place down.
Can we talk about that for a second real quick?
Oh yeah.
So this magical water map, whatever, he's like, the path to Ta Lo is only direct and it reveals itself once every whatever amount of years.
Once a year.
And now I know when and how.
He
but
says
we
that
saw
there's a specific time.
But we saw the water map, and it didn't tell you either of those things. So how do you know now? Anyway, that was stupid. Move along. Next.
So that's okay.
That part
at the very least, that's just giving information into the universe, whatever. But then the question, of course, in the viewer's mind is, well, how are they going to get there? Are they going to be taken there, or are they going to get there on their own? Right? Sure. Now, obviously, the obvious thing to do, which is what they do, is they get there on their own and put their hand to their dad. But how do they do that? Well, turns out Trevor what's-his-face, the actor, is there. Turns out he has a magical creature from Talo.
Somehow.
Turns out he can communicate with it. Turns out this creature knows specifically how to get there.
Turns out there is an underground tunnel system.
Turns out there's an underground tunnel system
that sister
Dad
knows how to
about,
navigate.
that sister knows about, that she's able to navigate to the garage.
It's just a lot of coincidences all lined up in a row.
And whew, it's really contrived. It's so contrived.
So,
and again, it's slightly less so because it was set up, but turns out Katie can drive real good.
Yeah, it wasn't.
But not in a way that really matters. And then we get to Talo after a rough bit of just nothing comedy dead scene of Trevor explaining something about Planet of the Apes.
He's so irrelevant to the whole movie.
He's a MacGuffin. He's a walking MacGuffin.
Then we have, structurally, the start of Act 2 would be arriving at the Ten Rings compound, whatever. The first obstacle being then getting thrown in the dungeon, and then them getting to Tello.
Yes.
The actual midpoint, the actual twist, the actual center of Act 2 would be them warning the people of Tello that Dad's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Then we start to flow towards the end of Act 2, or the second half of Act 2. The writers think that the second part of Act 2 would be ending with the Ten Rings arriving in Tello, I think. But then there's an expo dump for no reason from Auntie before the Ten Rings get there.
Oh.
There should... Okay. I don't know if we have any writers that are ever going to listen to this, but if you're expo dumping in the second half of Act 2, you wrote your script wrong, go back to Act 1 and figure out what you fucked up.
They're also expo dumping immediately following.
Because there should be no more exposition this far in the movie. There certainly shouldn't be 10 more minutes of exposition. Please fix your script.
Especially bad because of, in context, the worst line in the movie, which is... how does it go? It's...
No, what did the Ten Rings have to do with this? And then she proceeds to give us 10 minutes of exposition that, in fact, do not explain what the Ten Rings have to do with this.
And she never says the word Ten Rings. I don't think.
At the very end. The Dark Protector, or whatever the fucking soul sucker's name is, knows the Ten Rings can get him out. That's all she says.
Sure. So much of this movie is just not sticking in my brain.
So, on the fourth watch, so that should tell you something.
Just fucking bounce right off.
Structurally, the second act, bear with me, I know, but the second act is the training and preparation, the Ten Rings arriving in Tello, the Soul Suckers getting released from the Black Gate, the Black Gate actually opening, and the monster dying. The Act 2 structurally does not end until the big monster is dead. That takes place approximately 10 minutes before the end of the movie.
It's not great. It's not fantastic.
Which means the writers think that Act 3 is the Soul Suckers getting released, the gate breaking open, the monster dying, and then the 30-second funeral and best friend recap when they get home. If your monster isn't dead by the beginning of Act 3, you did it wrong. Okay? I just want you to know that act structure is so easily Googleable. There are diagrams, there are pictures. You don't have to try that hard to find what act structure is in any shape or form. Any version of act structure is very easily accessible for freezies. There's no reason for this because structurally, Act 3 is the releasing of the lanterns, recapping with friends, and Wong coming to get Sean and Katie. That's it.
Which takes all of 5 minutes.
But that's structurally what Act 3 is.
Yeah, that is the case.
Again, based on the much information that I've been studying for, what year is it? The last 9 years. Okay.
So my thing as I'm watching this last go around is as I'm thinking about the plot structure in more general terms than she is. Uh, I'm thinking about what happens in these acts, like what what plot or character progression happens, and I'm realizing that there's almost no emotional dialogue in this movie at all.
New.
People rarely actually talk about, as in have a two-way conversation about their feelings about anything. There's a lot of telling one person telling someone else how they feel. I think the closest we get is a conversation between Shang-Chi and Katie
Oh, when
the
he's
night
talking about his
before
dad.
the
Yeah.
big before the invasion happens.
Yeah.
Um, and she has a couple things to say back, but there's not really much of a resolution to that conversation, and more importantly, there's really no ramifications later on to it. They don't inform his character development or his choices or the way the fight goes, his
Not at all.
relationship with his father. Um, things just sort of happen, and people say they feel ways about it, and then something else happens. And that's kind of the whole movie.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy, right? I'm not
No,
forgetting.
you're 100% correct. That's just the whole
That
movie.
is just the whole movie. Now, like we've been talking about ways this could have been more interesting as the movie is ending. And they're having these interactions, these tiniest interactions with Wong, like, wow. God,
Look,
they had him for the movie.
At some point during this process,
He could have been in the whole movie.
I will just be dropping a PDF of my version of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I'm just gonna rewrite the screenplay, and here's the deal. I'm not gonna add a lot. Like, I might add moments so that our character devices get... But for the most part, I'm just gonna restructure the movie. And fix the glaring problems within its pacing.
Oh, the flashbacks. We didn't get to the flashbacks. It's a whole other thing.
We're doing a whole thing.
We have many notes, which I won't spoil.
Because I don't
future rewatches.
Because I'm working on my own screenplays. I'm not going to take the time to completely rewrite the movie the way it should have been written. But I will take what we were given, restructure it, and flesh out to the point where we have actual characters to work with.
Wouldn't that be nice? What
Um,
luxury characters.
And you know what? Consider it my Marvel fucking spec script, okay? So we're gonna...
That's not a terrible one to spec script for.
Fixing the things you guys fucked up is probably a bad way to pitch that, but it's what it is.
It's a bit late to say this, but if you like this movie, great. I'm genuinely surprised at how well received this movie is.
No, if you like this movie, I'm gonna need you to describe to me why you get no opinion if you can't defend it.
I mean, in general, I'm surprised at how
it's crazy, Patrick.
Specifically positively this movie is.
I'm literally so shocked, like flabbergasted, flummoxed.
I mean, when we first watched the movie, we weren't like blown away by it.
92% on Rotten Tomatoes. And for the record, after we watched it last week, I flushed my brain out with a good movie, A Knight's Tale, and that only has like 70-something% on Rotten Tomatoes.
A Knight's Tale was a breath of fresh air. That's our recommendation for this week.
Watch A Knight's Tale. That's my recommendation for every week.
I mean,
always be watching A Knight's Tale.
Well, that's true.
Any Heath Ledger movie. Cleanse your brain with any Heath Ledger movie.
I mean, and one of the things we were specifically talking about while it was going on, I was like, wow, this movie knows tonally what it wants to be.
It's so good. Not Shang-Chi, A Knight's Tale.
A Knight's Tale. And it's able to juggle the tones inherent in it very well.
Because it does serious stuff.
It's very comedic. It's very not taking itself seriously.
But then it does.
But then it has moments of real character intensity and stakes, which are well set up and
I will die on the hill that I love the MCU. There are certain MCU movies that I will ride or die for. Nothing in the MCU is better than A Knight's Tale. I will die on this hill. I understand the audience I'm speaking to right now, so I'm probably going to get some not positive interaction, and I don't care. A Knight's Tale is better than anything the MCU could do. And not only because it has Heath Ledger, but a lot because it has Heath Ledger. We have Paul Bettany. We can get it together, MCU.
Unfortunately, Knight's Tale also had
Paul Bettany.
also had Paul
That's why
Bettany.
I said what I said.
So it's sort of a 0-0 score at that point.
Honestly, the thing that comes the closest for me is WandaVision.
And WandaVision was quite good.
Yeah, it was. And he watched it without as much context as the rest of
Almost
us
no
have.
context.
But it was great.
Well, speaking of the MCU.
Oh, yes. We are going to start a companion series to this, where we start watching the rest of the MCU movies in chronological release order so that we can identify whether some of the things in Shang-Chi were MCU things or Shang-Chi specific things.
Yeah.
As well as kind of I did say last time we wanted to do this in like rank this or compare this in the context of the MCU, but you haven't seen all the MCU movies.
I'm missing a couple.
So
I've
we're
seen
catching
most
him
of
up.
them. There's a couple of spots I'm just sort of I'm missing.
There will also be a ranking list by the time we're done.
Yes, and this is
His
all
rankings and my rankings.
partially done coincidentally, which is nice for us, sort of amidst this sort of drought of MCU movies, which is not
Right.
necessarily unwelcome given the furious pacing over the last couple of years.
Right. So we are only getting one by a technicality, Deadpool and Wolverine, because the MCU does technically own it now. But that's it for the next year. So for the length that we are watching Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, there are really no MCU movies. So I think the companion series is gonna kind of help us go back and see without nostalgia goggles, because you didn't really watch them as they were coming out, did you?
Oh yeah.
Like theaters, like you were keeping up with them.
I mean, not necessarily theaters, but yeah, I was watching things as they came out.
Okay.
I mean, I remember
He doesn't have the emotional attachment, however.
No.
So there will be no nostalgia goggles.
So I
over
have
here?
grown up with the MCU, but not as a specific fan.
Yeah, you've grown
Right?
up MCU adjacent.
I-
That's not
like-
the same.
With as in alongside,
Right.
right? Not with as in becoming your whole personality.
I grew up
yes.
with it becoming my whole personality.
Also, she's actually read many of the comics. I have read none of the comics.
I've read almost all of the comics
Yeah.
that relate to the MCU.
So, yeah, I'm not invested or, sort of, none of this is going to matter to me. If, personally, in the sense that I won't be devastated if things go poorly.
We will, as we do this, also be releasing drinking games for every single one of the MCU movies.
Let's quickly go over. So we have a couple drinking just items.
No. We're gonna do that for Shang-Chi next time.
No. For the MCU though.
Oh, we'll go over that when we do Iron Man.
Oh, that's fair, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, we'll be doing drinking games specific for each MCU movie, and if I feel like it, I will also be dropping reading orders for each of the MCU movies if you are interested into getting into comics through your favorite MCU character or whatever.
Yeah, we'll also be running some information gathering, some tally marking over some data, so we can give you.
There will be spreadsheets galore.
Lovely.
Like I like. There will be spreadsheets and charts, and it's my favorite thing. That way, we also keep our sanity while doing all of these Shang-Chi rewatches. I need good movies to flush it out.
I'll be honest, this rewatch was partially because we were otherwise occupied, but I think this rewatch was slightly better for me.
That's because we were doing something else. I need to be occupied.
I know, but I feel like the lows weren't quite so low this time.
That's fair. Next time will be the constructing of the Shang-Chi drinking game.
Yes.
And then you will get to watch us play the drinking game the week after that.
Yeah, that's going to be a time.
Yeah.
It's going to be rough.
Okay, I think that's enough.
I think,
especially since we're doing Iron Man again tonight as well.
So yes. A Knight's
All right.
Tale.
Yes, please go watch A Knight's Tale. If you haven't seen it yet, you should. Thank you for joining us for week 4 of An Idea of All Time, watching Shang-Chi Legend of the Ten Rings.
How do you feel about 440?
Upset. All right. Join us for Iron Man when we do that one as well.